the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jan Anderson, are you with us? Janet, I don't want to start without Jan.
Yep. Jan, if you could raise your hand. Oh, I see you. Okay.
Now, the next two people I really need are Ken Colbrenner and Anthony Catalano.
Okay, I found Ken. I'm asking him to unmute. And who else?
Anthony Catalano.
I'm not sure. I'm prepared to go. I don't know that Anthony was just getting back today, so may not
Okay.
be available, but.
All right, one and all. The purpose of this evening is really to listen to the three sets of engineers who have done work to reduce wastewater staying in the lakes and polluting them primarily with phosphorus, but also with nitrates. There will be a Q&A, but I want to really limit it to questions of fact and not get into general opinions. All right, Ken, would you like to begin by making Woodard and Curran's presentation of how they would handle Lake Kitchewan?
Sure. Would you like video or screen sharing? I could, I don't know if that's available from the host. I'm happy to pop
Yes,
on.
it should be.
It says host has disabled participant screen sharing. I don't know if that's something.
Okay, hold on.
That was just prejudice against you, Ken.
I'll manage.
Okay, he's almost has it.
There we go.
Got it?
And hit share there.
Okay, good. He's got it.
Is that working?
I've got a beautiful picture of Lake Kitchewan.
There it is. Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Supervisor Parsons, board members, and members of the public attending for the opportunity to present. I'm Ken Colbrenner, project manager with Woodard and Curran, who worked on the study for Lake Kitchewan, and also have several others. Poppin and Emily Nealon was one of our engineers who was out doing the lake sampling and worked on the report as well. And so go through just a little background on what the existing conditions are at Lake Kitchewan, what we found from the sampling results as part of our study, go through the alternatives that were evaluated, what the recommendation is, and brief discussion then on next steps. So Lake Kitchewan, it's a 90-acre lake, Class B water body within the Croton watershed. And so, that location within the New York City DEP reservoir system gives it importance from a water quality perspective above and beyond the normal, recreational lake usage. And that's part of what the study at this point was entirely funded by New York City DEP as part of their ongoing work to maintain the water quality in their drinking water system. And as part of this, we looked at some of the previous studies that had been conducted. The lake up until about 2008 was going through the CSLAP program for the citizens doing the lake sampling and adjusting or testing water quality and finding eutrophic conditions. And also around that same time, 2008, 2009, part of the watershed management and the town-wide comprehensive lake management plans. And those found that there were likely contributions from septic systems and or failing or potentially failing septic systems contributing to impacts on the lake water quality.
Class B water body is a size designation?
No, it's a water quality designation in terms of
Okay.
Looking for recreational contact use.
Okay.
And so as part of the study, we looked at the entire watershed area for the lake, which are those outlined parcels there, everything that drains directly to it. So a total of about 630 parcels. Of those, about 75% developed. But you can see there's a high percentage of steep slopes. And so what we looked at initially was, what are the impacts due to or the potential limiting factors for septic systems and contribution, and steep slope being one of those potential impacts. So where you have those areas, you're less likely to be able to get effectively treating septic systems before an effluent before it's reaching the groundwater and ultimately the lake water. And especially we kind of started to focus in on the area, immediately adjacent to the lake around the lake association, seeing more of those steep slopes and also smaller lots. So, when we look at again, the entire, watershed area, about a 2 acre, average lot size, but specifically around immediately adjacent to the lake there, much smaller parcels, about a third of an acre. And when you have that limited size, if you do have other contributing factors or limitations, having that small size makes it even more difficult to find a suitable area for treatment and disposal when you're relying on the soil itself to be doing that treatment. And so, can see here, even several, under a quarter acre. And what that, results in is a high density of septic systems, and the potential that, even if there are not failing septic systems that are not functioning properly can contribute to impacts on the lake water quality. And so what we did to dig into that a little bit further is, in addition to the in-lake sampling, similar to what was done at as part of the CSLAP programs and prior results, also analyzed at the outfalls. There's a couple stormwater drainage systems in the association, as well as some streams, and looked at what we were finding for a range of water quality impacts. Have a selection here of the phosphorus, as was mentioned, as typically a limiting nutrient for freshwater bodies. And we see eutrophic conditions at above 0.02 milligrams per liter. And what we were seeing, average and max concentrations of those, outfalls well in exceedance of that coming into the lake. So, substantial phosphorus loading, as well as also fecal coliform as an indicator of bacteria. And so, a not properly functioning septic system, because we'd expect to see that if those are properly functioning, that's being treated as part of the flow through the groundwater, and really seeing those spikes, and as part of the sampling did a comparison also, dry weather and wet weather to see any impacts and changes there, as we were seeing the increased runoff raised water table that were contributing. And so from there, looked at several different alternatives for what to do to address the impacts that we're seeing. And so as part of the scope of the study was to have the report structured in a format suitable for application for funding from New York State EFC. And so they have a prescriptive engineering report format that includes several alternatives, one of them being the no action alternative. And so looked at what happens there is basically not doing anything, which is the situation that we're currently in. And as we've seen, that's been contributing to ongoing degradation to the lake water quality, as well as ultimately the impacts to the reservoir. So then looked at, in terms of wastewater solutions, a range from repair and replacement of existing septic systems, so installation of enhanced on-site systems, all the way up to a full centralized treatment system, including sewers and treatment plant for smaller areas, as well as the entire watershed area, so including the larger properties as well. And as you can imagine, as we extend that scope, certainly the construction costs and anticipated project costs increase substantially with that. And so as an in between, also evaluated an option, two options of decentralized treatment, so clustering septic systems to try to get some economy of scale with the disposal, and targeting on the critical areas. And so that's where we really landed in terms of looking at the critical area being that area of small properties immediately adjacent to the lake, contributing to the highest loading impacts. And so trying to be most effective in where we're providing that enhanced treatment, focusing on that area. And so the recommendation in the report is a repair and replacement alternative for the 187 properties in that critical area, those smaller properties. This would be installation of an enhanced treatment unit, taking the place of the septic system, and basically functions as a mini treatment plant on each property. And so providing additional aeration, filtration, and treatment benefits than a typical septic system, which relies on just the solid settling within the tank and then disposal over a large soil area in the fields. The benefits of enhanced treatment, also ability to potentially reduce the field size needed because you're getting cleaner effluent coming out of the septic tank. And then further, again, if you have a limited site area in terms of property size, being able to rely on that enhanced treatment. So should there be, any additional limitation, depth to groundwater, depth to bedrock, that may limit the septic treatment, at least there's the benefit of the enhanced treatment before it even hits the soil, and then you're getting cleaner water hitting the groundwater, so ultimately improving the lake water quality, and seeing with that the reduced nutrient loading to the lake.
Can you describe enhanced treatment in a bit more detail?
Sure. So typically these systems include an aeration component. So there are some more electrical components as part of the system to provide a better secondary treatment process for the effluent, and then filtration, and so they have, you can see kind of in the cutaway there, a couple different zones within the tank. So broken that up to provide the different modules of treatment within each zone, whereas a traditional septic tank would just have a single baffle rely on that settling and then flowing out to the fields from there. So as you travel through each zone, you're getting that additional treatment. There are also recirculation options that help provide enhanced nutrient nitrogen removal specifically. And there's also dosing components. So have a pumped system as part of that. And again, having that dosing helps to provide better longevity for the fields as well. So instead of being, loaded heavily as the flow's coming in each day, they're able to spread that flow out, more evenly, and provides a enhanced benefit of increasing the longevity of the fields before they're failing.
What's the life, excuse me, what's the life expectancy of an enhanced treatment unit like this?
You will have the tank and major components similar to a traditional septic tank. Your moving parts, your blowers, pump motors may be more on the order of a 10-year cycle. And typically, health department requires that there is a maintenance component as part of these units to ensure that they're being maintained to provide that continued level of treatment. Because like with anything else, if it's not being maintained, then we're not going to see the benefit long term.
Is there media that requires regular replacement?
Yes, as part of that maintenance.
Okay.
And that's done typically through the manufacturer. So that's having the certified or a certified installer capable of handling that. That's not something the homeowners undertaking on their own.
Okay.
And there's more than one vendor or even sort of technology for these type of alternative units, is there not? Would there be some sort of like a RFP process to go identify the supplier?
Yeah, that as part of the report, we did work with a local septic installer who's experienced in a lot of these enhanced systems and had some recommendations in terms of what they've been seeing there, and were able to get some pricing as part of that. But in terms of building our cost estimates, but certainly as part of the next step, which would be more detailed design involved, would be determining which options there are, a range of different manufacturers and even different media types and things like that could be looked at.
And the output from these is almost tertiary or something, and the field is just gravy after that, or is it an intermediate kind of phase?
Yeah, you're not getting tertiary in terms of New York City DEP rules and regs, microfiltration, and disinfection. They do have disinfection additions that can be added, but yeah, certainly you're getting enhanced the treatment as well as the filtration, depending on the media or the filter that's installed before it's hitting the fields. And so to look at where we are in terms of completing that, like I said, we are in the process of finalizing the report. We've gotten review comments from New York City DEP as part of their process, and are working to incorporate those. And then going forward, working with the town to evaluate and consider grant and financing opportunities. The intent of the report was to have an engineering report suitable for application to New York State EFC, and then look for opportunities to apply for those to assist in advancing implementation of the recommended alternative, which would include a more detailed design and implementation from there. Any other questions?
Ken, could you say, I know you said it wasn't tertiary treatment, but could you give a % of the phosphorus, some range that might be reduced by these units And then did you size at all, if all 187 of the 400 plus houses put this in, did you size any kind of reduction that might mean in terms of load to Kitchewan?
Yeah, so we were seeing, in terms of the loading, I think, about that there are multiple sources of the, phosphorus. There's also, stormwater components, but about, 2/3 to 3/4 of that was, septic effluent. And so, or anticipated to be from septic sources. As far as the percent removals, again, looking at a couple different manufacturers, I think, one, they were on the order of, 90+% for nitrogen, not quite as high for phosphorus, but, with that, seeing that reduction, getting down, seeing the improvement in terms of what is going into the lake.
Wait a minute. So you're suggesting that if 66% of the phosphorus comes from septics, we could get rid of what, 55, 60% of the phosphorus?
Yeah, I'd have to pull up. I don't have the specific, pounds loading numbers in front of me, but seeking to reduce, phosphorus, septic effluent being one of the major contributors, of that, to the lake, and seeing this as a significant way, from those, concentrated properties to reduce that.
Are there lake communities that have followed a similar path that we can look to see what their experience was?
In terms of enhanced
Using
treatment,
the same kind of schema to replace individual systems with these alternative systems, and then, any experience about how the impact was that? Okay.
Yeah, I know most locally, Putnam County had a septic repair program where they were, not as an overall lake, but, at certain, spot locations were installing some of these septic repairs. I know one of the challenges they had was the ongoing maintenance was not there for those. So contributing to that, seeing other, lake communities further up north, Lake George, and others, looking to do, these types of enhanced units on a larger scale to provide that benefit.
So it sounds like at this scale and sort of collectively, this is fairly unique. And this is probably not necessarily a question for you, but I'm wondering if the maintenance could be packaged up almost in some sort of lake district, which I know the state had been really against new districts and everything, but just as a way of ensuring that those maintenance tasks were done and not, leaving it to chance.
Yeah, I think that would be the intent, if we're doing this to try to, include that as part of a district. So you have a responsible party for that maintenance going forward, certainly does create some logistical challenges in terms of the installation, the work, we're talking on private property is, I see the attorneys nodding along there. Not looking forward to an easement.
Don't worry, Greg will take care of
it.
Ken, a few of the west of Hudson towns I'm aware of have formed septic maintenance districts, basically formed them by local law, and provided for the upkeep and maintenance of the systems with assistance, I believe, with the West of Hudson monies as part of the funding source and whatever other grant sourcing and whatever other assessment among the properties within the district boundaries have been utilized. And that's probably what you'd be considering, at least initially. And Ken's right. You have the issue of consent, because virtually all of any repair work would be done on private property. So there are a few hoops to jump through there, but it's something that once you decide on an alternative that would incorporate that type of concept is doable. It's just a matter of which one you're going to ultimately done once the report is finalized and the recommendations are finalized and goes in EFC form. So you're eligible for funding there. So.
Paul, do you want to speak? Paul Gallagher. Janet, can you let him in if that's the problem?
I did. I just
Okay.
asked him to unmute.
Okay.
Paul Gallagher?
Muted again. I don't know what happened. He was unmuted. Now he's muted.
Well, if you could raise your hand again. In the meantime, do you want to? Here he is.
Good.
Hello? Pete Gallagher? Okay. I don't know where he went. Do you want me to start with?
His hand is raised, but he's muted again. Now he's good. Now he's unmuted. Go,
Right.
Paul, go.
Hello, Pete Gallagher?
Paul.
Paul Gallagher?
I think it's Paul.
Paul, yeah. Oh, he's muted again. He's having problems with
Muted
his
again.
sound.
Okay, I'm going to do it one more time and then maybe move on. Paul Gallagher?
Maybe leave him unmuted for now while he's trying to figure out his sound and move on.
Okay, how about Randy was next that I had seen. Randy? Randy?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how you doing? Randy, I live over in Wacabuck. I know you're talking about Lake One, but I feel we're talking about the same animal here when it comes to septic systems. So,
Yes, but there is a Wacabuck presentation coming up.
right, later on. Okay, you want me to wait until then? I'll gladly
Yeah,
wait.
I think that would be better.
If it's
Okay, very good.
generic about the technology or something, though, it
Yeah,
might be
yeah.
of interest to everybody, though.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, I'm looking
Yeah.
at this enhanced treatment unit, and the homes on Wacabuck, I'm sure, are very similar to Kitchewan, the ones on the waterfront. I grew up on Lake George, and I remember replacing septic systems at our home right along the lake. The septic systems were tiny, and they didn't work well. Now most people with property pump it up a hill or pump it away from the lake and have it drain down. My question is, first of all, are these small fields on these lakeside properties enough for proper filtration of the water when it comes out of these treatment units? And my second question is, what is the cost to the homeowner? We all want clean lakes. I have lake rights to Lake Wacabuck on Perch Bay Road. And what is the cost to the homeowner to install one of these enhanced treatment units?
So for the overall project cost, we're on the order of just under $4 million for the properties. And so, looking at that, depending on the funding and financing, as well as the O&M is then paid over a period for, joining. So it's could be a 30-year, capital cost repayment or SRF loan for that funding. If certainly if there's grant opportunities, reduces that, but over time on the order of $20,000 to $30,000 per property, which is starting to be on the order of what a septic replacement, full replacement cost would end up being.
Okay, so $20,000 to $30,000 per property for the enhanced treatment center, and all costs included in that, I guess.
But again, as part of a district, would be, likely an annual cost, so you'd be having the O&M piece, built into that, as well as the financing, repayment costs.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, are you on yet? Paul Gallagher?
I don't see his hand up.
Okay.
Oh, there it is. Wait. There it is. Okay. Paul, I'm asking you to unmute. You're unmuted. Paul? Can you hear us, Paul? Okay, how about going on to Deborah Baker? Is that
All
okay,
right.
Peter? Deborah, I'm asking you to unmute.
Yep.
Hello? I'm asking you to unmute again, Deborah?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, I was just going to ask the same similar questions to Randy's in terms of the cost per unit. And the 20 to 30,000, we talked about an annual cost, but the 20 to 30,000 is sort of the cost to get the unit installed, I presume, and then there's an annual ongoing maintenance cost associated, which would be what, more like a typical annual having the septic system pumped cost? I wasn't clear on I'm sure it's not 20 to 30,000 a year. That was the initial upfront installation cost, I presume. And so that was part one. What do you anticipate the annual cost would be? And then two, to what extent is this a purely voluntary project? Because if you don't get a high level of compliance, then it's sort of not going to be effective.
Right, and that gets to the piece in terms of forming the district. If there's a district formation, would be subject to approval of the properties within the district, and to get the benefit of the improved water quality, would look to have that all the properties included that are in that critical area. So that's where, if it becomes subject to a vote, if it is voted to move forward, all the properties would be required to be a part of that, pay the ongoing costs, and get the benefit of the replacement system. And so I don't know, specifically if we want to get into, the mechanics of how that, works in terms of a referendum.
No, because we're nowhere near that stage.
Yeah, no, it's not necessary. I think the question's been answered. What's the ballpark cost? And then later on, it's how do you get the highest possible compliance, because it won't be effective otherwise. So we're not there yet, but thank you very much.
And then Peter, Carol Cernak, I'm asking you to mute, Carol.
Hi, Carol Cernak, South Salem, New York. I just find it very concerning that
Carol,
the town
is this directly about Lake?
Yes,
Fitzroy?
it's directly about the wetlands and the waterways of Lewisboro's town.
Carol,
if you
the only
wanna
questions
mute
we're
me?
entertaining at the moment are about
You want to mute me,
Lake
Peter?
Fitzroy. Period.
Period?
Yes. The person I'm anxious to hear from is Paul Gallagher, because he's worked on this from the very beginning.
Peter, you're just an old fart.
Thank you very
and
much.
I have a right to.
Do me a favor, Janet, and mute Carol.
Yeah.
I did. Sorry, Carol.
Just,
Paul Gallagher, we're going to try you one more time, Paul. I'm asking you to unmute. Paul? Paul, can you hear me?
problem.
As a suggestion, Peter, can we have each of the presenters list their contact information email? So if people in each lake community have questions, they could follow up directly via email.
Yes, but it looks as though we've reached the end of Lake Kitchewan, and I'd like to, in the interest of time, I'd like to move on.
Yeah, just if people, when it's posted after, and if people have questions, down the road, they have a contact source. That's all.
Jim, do you want to ask a question? Jim Denilewicz?
Jim, I'm asking you to mute.
Yes, Peter.
Yes.
And Richard, one important thing I wanted to point out, I guess, to everybody is that through this process, which has been going on since the beginning of the year, the consultants have done a great job at community outreach, which is one reason why, and Richard, not that I'm against doing what you said, but I want everybody to know that the consultants some of them have made websites, we've had community participation and information sessions where the consultants for each lake have done various activities to collect information on septic systems and give people a big picture overview of what we were doing earlier on in the process. So I just wanted, Rich, for you to understand that.
Terrific. That's great.
And for everybody to understand that. This isn't the first time we've reached out to the community.
And also for the folks on the call, these reports are available on our website. So I don't know if everyone saw the agenda, but there are links in the agenda to the actual reports. The summary reports.
The executive summary.
Correct, yes.
Okay, Ken, thank you very much. And unless you've got something urgent to go on with, I'd like to move on to Lake Truesdale.
Sounds great. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you.
I'd like to move on and invite Chrissy Swan and John Watson to speak on.
Would you mind raising your hands, please? Chrissy Swan and John Watson. Okay, there's. Okay.
Can you also unmute Mr. Manning?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that he was on the call.
Yes, he is here.
And
Chrissy, good evening.
Mr. Parson.
okay, Chrissy, and then Eric Scholbaum, do you want?
Yep, Eric also, please.
Okay, I'm asking Eric. Okay, and who is the third?
Mike Manning. I think it's Manning, M-E or something.
Okay. I'm not seeing him.
There's a man in ME.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to ask.
That's him.
Okay. Can you make him a co-host, Sean? Yep, give us a second for the third one. Yep, we're getting Joel. Hold on just one more second, please. Could he raise his hand, please? They think they got him. So I think you should be set.
Mike, are you there?
Here. Good
Great.
evening, everybody.
Good evening. Chrissy, are you going to take the run this presentation?
Yes, she is.
I just guessed.
All right, are we ready to get started?
Yep.
All right, excellent. Well, thank you everybody for allowing us some time tonight to talk about the Truesdale Lake study. It's been a really fun project for us, and we're very glad to be here tonight to present our findings to date. My name is Mike Manning, and I'm with Ramble, and we have partnered with this project with Insight Engineering out of Carmel, and Ramble and Insight have done many projects together. So we really are a good team, and we think alike and work well together. So just a quick agenda here. So obviously we're going to talk a little bit about ourselves, and then we're going to dive into the existing conditions about what the lake looks like, what we know about the lake, and how we got to how we went through some of our evaluations. And then finally, we're going to wrap up with some recommendations, some short list recommendations, and then as well as a larger list of recommendations for moving forward. And lastly, if there's any questions, we're more than happy to help out. Just a quick slide of our team. Myself, I'm a project officer with Ramble. To my right is Chrissy Swan. She's the project manager. And also with us today is Amit Eakin. He's the engineer who's been doing a lot of the work behind the scenes. And then from Insight, we have John Watson and Eric Schloboom, who have been instrumental in the field work and all the quantitative work for this project. Next. Similar to the Lake Kitchewan presentation, this study was commissioned by the DEP and funded through NWIPIC with a primary goal of understanding the conditions of the lake and developing a path forward to reducing nutrient loading. As we discussed earlier in the last presentation, and similar to this lake, the lake water quality has been deteriorating over some time. In addition, Lake Truesdale is a part of the New York City DEP Croton watershed, so protection of the lake is a very important aspect here. Next, Chrissy. Just a few lake facts, probably no surprises here to this group, but Truesdale Lake is an 83-acre lake, man-made lake constructed in 1927. There's a dam on the north end of the lake. It's about 200 feet wide and I believe 18 feet high. But the lake it's relatively shallow. It's about 14 feet deep. And as I noted previously, it's on the very eastern edge of the DEP Croton watershed. You can see up on the corner of this slide, northeast upper right corner of the slide, that is the border, Connecticut border is right there, very close. Next. So when we got into this project, we dove right in. We're looking at the demographics and the area, and we chose the path of separating the project into two zones. Zone 1 is the zone that's immediately surrounding the lake, the smaller lots, and we kind of set the point the distance point at about 800 feet. And about 800 feet is where the smaller lots and the larger lots start, except on the southeastern edge, you can see where the larger lots are a little bit closer to the lake. Zone 2 is all the green, and Zone 2 lots are larger, and some of them are a little bit upland. And there's about 140 residents in Zone 2, and just to back up a bit, under Zone 1, there's about 274 residents. And one of the primary reasons we separated by these zones is that as we got into evaluations, we knew that there's certain types of wastewater management techniques that would work better in the smaller lots versus the large lots. So that kind of set the stage for how we would move forward with the evaluations. Next, please. A little bit more about the background. As we all know, the nutrient loading to the lake has been increasing, and there are several components that make up nutrients, but phosphorus is the biggest concern. And because of the nutrient loadings, the lake has some compromised water quality, and the current water quality does not meet the recommended level for many recreational uses, and the nutrients lead to algal blooms and low water visibility. And one of the things that we focus on in these types of studies is to take a hard look at those things we can control. And one of the primary source of phosphorus loading, as you heard in the last presentation as well, is from septic tanks. So that's essentially what we focus most of our time on for this presentation, or for this project, that is. Next. At this point, I'm going to pass the presentation over to John Watson, who is going to describe the process of going through and evaluating all the properties and developing a plan of attack for going through the evaluation phase.
Thanks, Mike.
Yep.
So the first step was we had a study area that was delineated to us and given to us by the DEP. And the first step that we did was to get some data collection of this service area. We gathered mostly digital data from the New York City DEP, the Department of Health, the town of Lewisboro, Westchester County Department of Planning, and we reviewed historical studies on the lake that were given to us by the town. And what this allowed us to do was put together a bedroom count for every parcel within the study area. It gave us the parcel, the locations, the age of the houses, and ultimately this allowed us to develop a sewer flow allocation for every parcel in our district. So we were able to come up with an actual flow based on the actual bedroom counts of all the residences there. We also looked at operational characteristics such as septic tank pump outs and septic tank repairs and rehabilitations. That information was provided to us by the health department. This would give us known or suspected underperforming septic systems. We also looked at environmental characteristics such as site conditions of the area. Next slide, Mike. So this is a list of some of the factors that could influence the septic system performance and ultimately impact Truesdale Lake. One of the important ones is depth to groundwater and depth to bedrock. Both the New York City DEP and the Westchester County Department of Health have a 5-foot vertical separation distance from the bottom of an absorption field to groundwater or bedrock. Another health department DEP requirement is septic systems are currently not allowed in steep slopes over 15%. We also look at soil types for septic system performance. We're looking for sandy, gravelly soils that perk well. Silty soils and clay soils are not desirable for septic systems, on-site septic systems. We also look at proximity to lakes, watercourses, and wetlands. Both the Department of Health and the DEP have a 100-foot horizontal separation distance from those water resources to a septic system. As many of you are aware, town of Lewisboro, you have a 150-foot wetland buffer. So you've taken that 150-foot and made it conservatively larger because of the potential impacts to your resources. Separation distance from adjoining water wells. I know that some of the areas here have central water systems, but some of them don't. Some of them still have individual water wells. There are separation distances from septic systems to the water wells of 100 feet in all directions and 200 feet if the septic system is uphill of the well. Next slide. So based on all those constraints that I listed out in the previous slide, we prepared a figure for each one of those that show how that factor is related to this study area. So what we've done here, I've taken one to discuss, and that's depth to the water table. So water table is one of the critical design considerations for septic systems. As I mentioned, adequate vertical separation between the absorption fields and groundwater is essential for optimal septic system performance. I mentioned that the health department DEP requirement was 5 feet from the bottom of the absorption system to the water table. A typical septic system depth is about 2.5 feet, which would mean that you need water to be over 7 feet deep in order to have a properly functioning septic system that meets the current health department DEP code. So if you look at the figure that we have on screen, we've got 3 main colors. There's the red color. That cranberry red color, it is parcels with groundwater from 0 to 2 feet below the surface. The yellow orange colored parcels have groundwater from 2 foot to 6 foot below the ground surface. And the green parcels are lots that have groundwater greater than 6 foot deep. So if you follow the metric I just mentioned previously, all of the red and yellow parcels do not have adequate separation distance to put in a code conforming septic system. So if you look at around Lake Truesdale, the entire perimeter of the lake and most of our zone 1 has inadequate vertical separation distance to groundwater table. And that's just one of the factors. As I mentioned, there were many factors, and many of these lots are deficient in many of these factors. Next slide. In summary, for the data gathering portion, we found out that there are many poor septic system conditions that are contributing nutrients to the lake. We've seen that we have septic systems installed in poor soils without adequate water table clearance, shallow depth bedrock, parcels that are too small or too steeply sloped to provide proper septic system treatment. We have septic systems that are antiquated, that need service and a replacement. We have septic systems that have not been inspected, pumped, or maintained. One of the reports that we had shows that there are some septic systems that haven't been inspected, pumped, or maintained in over 20 years. So I'd like to end with just a statement that most septic failures are subsurface and impossible to identify. So even though the health department has some information on repairs and remediations, a lot of these septic failures are underground and you don't know until you actually open up the septic system. Okay, Mike?
Okay, thank you, John. So using that data, and believe me, there's a lot of data, we went through and we did a model of the area, the service area. We looked at several different factors, or we ran the model under several different scenarios, from little to no failure to a very high level failure. So this slide that we're presenting here today is the worst case scenario. So this is the scenario if half of the systems were to fail or were underperforming, as John just described, for one or more of those factors. As I noted earlier, there are some things that we really can't control relative to phosphorus loading or nutrient loading to the lake, but overwhelmingly, septic system output is predominant. It's the predominant impact on the lake. So as you can see here on this, again, this is worst case scenario, and our 4 model runs, septic systems would contribute about 92% of the loading to the lake. Next slide, please. So we looked at a number of alternatives, both for zone 1 and zone 2. As we noted earlier, zone 1 is very conducive to a wastewater management systems that rely on collection systems, or similar scenarios where zone 2 with larger lots and the further away from the lake, and in areas where they're up higher and above the groundwater, they would work better with a septic system. So one of the options we looked at is upgrading the existing on-site septic systems, and those would include the enhanced nutrient reduction units, as we all just learned about not too long ago, and a rigid inspection and repair program, and development of a septic maintenance district. So, so we've all learned about that, and so we can ask if there's any questions. We can get to that in a minute. And then the two other options that we landed on for shortlist were treatment at a regional wastewater treatment plant, and that includes collecting the wastewater in the collection sewer and conveying it to a local wastewater treatment plant. So we looked at all the plants reasonably within 10 miles of Lake Truesdale, and when looking at them, we want to make sure they're close enough and that they also have enough capacity to take the flow. And then the third thing we looked at was, collection sewers in the area and then treatment nearby. And the closest facility to Lake Truesdale is at the Lewisboro Elementary School. So for this option, we looked at what it would take to expand the existing wastewater plant, which has a capacity today of 8,000 gallons per day, to increase that capacity to approximately 140,000 gallons per day. And the other component of that is the flow would have to be effluent, could not discharge to the existing effluent point, because that's a intermittent stream. So we'd have to build a force main down to the Wacabuck River for discharging the effluent there. Now, just similar to what we presented earlier, any of these alternatives, when constructed together, would have a major impact on the phosphorus reduction to the lake, because most of the wastewater would be collected and treated to a very high level, either locally or at a regional wastewater plant. Next slide, please. So what we came down to two recommended alternatives for further review. And zone 1, we recommended going with a low pressure sewer system with treatment at the expanded Lewisboro-Katona Elementary School, and then the effluent outfall at the Wacabuck River. This system would serve 274 parcels. And obviously something like this could be designed to serve more parcels as needed for further development. Zone 2, we recommended that zone 2 be covered with a septic maintenance district with continued on-site treatment. And this would support about 145 systems. Next slide, please. And so we just wanted to close on a little table here that we put together. This matches up the pie chart we showed earlier of the worst case scenario of loading. And if you go across the top row, zone 1, again, this is worst case. The loading would be about 1,000 pounds per year of phosphorus, with zone 2 at 96 pounds per year. The second row shows the non-point source loading. These are the things that we cannot control. But when you roll it all down together, total lake loading is about 1,185 pounds per year. And then you back out what the loading would be coming off of the wastewater treatment plant, which was estimated at 213 pounds. That's quite a reduction in the nutrient loading. So we went through the scenario with multiple runs, and again, this is the worst case scenario. The next worst case scenario, the top numbers are about 500 instead of 1,100, and then you can go through the numbers from there. But we believe any of these alternatives would create a lot of benefit to the lake if implemented. So that is the end of our presentation. We're happy to take any questions from any of us, Chrissy, John, Eric, or myself.
I'm going to ask Nick Fagoli to unmute. Nick?
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Great. Hi, everyone. Nick Pagoli. I'm the former president of the Truesdale Lake Property Owners Association. And as president, I was involved in 9 of the 10 monthly phone calls on this issue. So just to give everyone a quick background, I was intimately involved with the meetings on this, on our lake. So 2 quick questions. One was a question that was asked on the prior lake, which will be, I have the data, but I would like you to answer, what would be the cost to build out on the option that you're recommending as your number 1 recommendation? The overall cost per homeowner. I'm trying to flip through the document that I have, that 80 pager, but I can't find it quickly. And then I just have a second quick follow-up.
Oh, sure. So, well, admittedly, it's a big number. I mean, this is it's an expensive project. Our budget, our cost estimate and budget is $31,246,000. That includes a very large contingency. Because, as a lot of us know, that we're in some really interesting times when it comes to cost estimating and project budgeting. So, at this point in the project, we want to make sure there's enough contingency within the project. Granted, this kind of money, it's not supported by a small group of homeowners. I think we're talking, 280 homeowners. It's not feasible. The only way it would be feasible is with substantial grant funding from various funding agencies like EFC or New Whippick or rural development, if you were to go down that path. So right now, I mean, not to knock people off their chairs, but the annual cost per user would be in the range of $4,900. So again, that is not sustainable. When we do these projects, we aim for $1,000 a year per user as a starting point. It's a good point to start the discussion, and then we can go up or down from there depending on the locality. So a lot of grant funding would be required. We estimated. Got the number right here. We estimated about 27 million in grant funding would be required to make this feasible for the users.
Right, and that was just the upfront cost. Then the annual maintenance you had calculated at, was it 300 a month? Did I see?
Now the annual maintenance is again that's high as well. That's calculated at $1,475 right now. Yeah. So, and again, we took the best guess we could, or best effort we could on the annual O&M costs. We're hoping there's some contingency built in that, but possibly they can come down. There are some subsidies available for O&M as well, but it's too early to be talking about what those subsidies would amount to at this point. We just don't know, have that information yet.
Right. And then my second question was on the document you had sent out to us. You had calculated somewhere between 20 and 70% of the phosphorus load is from septic, but on your presentation you calculated worst case scenario at 92%. Why is the discrepancy in those numbers?
Oh, since the document you saw, we spent a ton of time after that was submitted so that we could, really dive into it and look at different scenarios. So what we presented today was the absolute worst case scenario, and that is based on 50% failure, which really, frankly, is probably a little bit unrealistic, but given some of the environmental conditions, someone could read into it that way. We are more comfortable with a 15% failure, which is recommended by the EPA. The EPA has, in various studies, have identified that an annual rate of failure for septic tanks, or we'll call it the entire on-site disposal system, is somewhere between 10 and 20%. So we landed on 15%. in our second model run. And that resulted in about 400 pounds per year. And that's a lot closer to what we noted earlier. That's a 77% removal between zones 1 and 2.
That was my questions. Thanks, guys.
You're welcome. Thanks for attending.
Okay, Nick, thank you. Next, I'm asking Lucille Munns to unmute.
Hi, good evening, folks. My name is Lucille Munns, and I live at 26 Hoyt Street on Lake Truesdale, but I also am on the board of directors, and I am the water commissioner for the lake. Just a couple of points I'd like to note. There's roughly 150 houses that are actually on our well system, our municipal well system. So the majority of the folks, or 3/4 of the folks around the lake frontage, are actually on our well system. So I just want to make that point very clear. Another thing I'd like to make clear is that in 2009, Westchester County had a phosphorus ban. And the question I have is, moving forward, was there actually water testing done, water quality testing done, or is this based on data from 2009? That's what I read in the report. Something to just keep in mind. And if the recommendation is to go to a system such as grinders or low pressure pumps that requires electricity, the other component and concern I would have is that we experience tremendous power outages here. And so when the power is out and the grinder pump isn't working, how does that affect a system like this? These are just some of the things that, that I'm concerned about. And also too, with the reduction in the phosphorus in the fertilizers, how does that impact the water quality? And I can say that over the years between that and our lake management company, we have done a tremendous job here in improving the lake and water quality. In fact, folks that have been living here for 30 years have said it's never looked as good. So we're very proud of that fact. And the other concern I would have is just the maintenance of something. If certain folks aren't even maintaining their septic systems now, that means to pump it every 2 years for $400, how are they going to maintain a more aggressive system of, that requires electrical maintenance, and it's got moving parts and it's got, a motor in it essentially. I maintain my septic system because it's important. Most people do, I would hope, but when it's more complex, that's going to be more complex maintenance. So that's something to also keep in mind. But the other question I have too is, are there other alternatives for helping our water quality? And that may be with water reduction. We are in a water well system here, and I always encourage our residents to reduce their water quality. How do they do that? Low flow toilets. Let's put water conservation devices in place. That helps twofold. That helps reduce our draw on our water system, but also reduces the effluence that's going into the lake. So those are just some of my observations and concerns that I have with regard to, how we're just kind of looking at it in a very narrow focus. It's just septic systems. And maybe that was your charge, and I appreciate all that hard work. But this has to be looked at in context as a whole. It's a system, and how the water goes in is coming from other places. The water's going in and out. And then if we upgrade our septics or upgrade our system and folks don't need fields as much, are they going to be building bigger houses because now they can, because now they have more land? Does that now increase our water drawn on impact? So those are just some of my comments, but I would like, the 2009 data may not be very relevant today, especially since there's been the fertilizer ban. And we have worked very hard on Lake Truesdale to improve the water quality. And, at the end of the day, that's what the goal is, to improve our water quality for the lake, but it also is helping improve the water quality for the drinking water of New York City. That's what I have.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Well, there's a lot of questions there, but I'll respond to the last one there about the 2009 study report data. So we were using that as the background for the project, and realizing all the strides that the community has made in water quality, we realized that that data is not as useful as it was initially. So it's a good starting point for us, and that's why we, kind of led us to really take a harder look at what the loading would be. And we went back to the drawing board and started all over again. Understanding where the lake was back in 2009. And there's also a report in 2016 that kind of like bridged the gap and provided some additional information for us. So using that information, we ran a series of model runs and came up with a variety of different scenarios. And then those will all be identified in the report when the report is finalized and made available to the public. And at that point, once you've had a chance to read it, we're more than happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I can very quickly, like in a couple sentences, respond to most of your other questions. Regarding when the power goes out, the grinder pump, on-lot low pressure sewer pump stations, they're built in with at least 1 day design flow of emergency overflow storage, so that when the power goes out, you've already got hundreds of gallons built in as storage. The comment about people maintaining these enhanced treatment units or the grinder pumps, either one, there's going to be a separate town district set up for these zones, and it's going to be run by there's going to be an operator running that district that will be doing it. So it will not be in the hands of the homeowners. It'll be in the hands of the town, either the town or your association, but it'll be in the hands of a licensed operator. And the last one about the thought that you'll have parcels that will now be able to be built on that are unbuildable now. The DEP and the New York City and the Westchester County DOH do not allow for any reduction in absorption area for new construction if you use any type of enhanced treatment unit. So this is only for repairs or remediations to existing systems. You cannot get a reduction in septic system area for new construction under both DEP and DOH guidelines.
Okay, can I move on to John Guzmano? I'll ask you to unmute, John.
Hi, I'm John Guzmano. I live right on Truesdale Lake. I've been here for 26 years. I am in charge of lake management on our board. And both Nick and Lucille have covered a lot of the same topics that I would have mentioned. And I will say through the education and awareness of the environment and everything over the past 10 so years, people do pay a lot more attention. Yes, it is a challenge, but the water quality in our lake, I have to say, is, certainly much better than I've ever seen it and continues to improve. We do have challenges. I'm starting to go off topic, but first of all, I have a problem with using, because I come out of the data end of business, using data that's over 10 years old to judge anything by, especially since we had the phosphorus ban after the data was initially taken. So first recommendation is to go do a current set of testing to see where our lake currently is. The second part, and I'm asking this as a question, when you did the study as far as what comes into this lake, did you actually consider what's coming in from Connecticut, since that is the majority of the drainage area going into our lake, which we know we don't have any control over? I would, I look at the geography around the properties on this lake, and I'm not sure how you'd ever get a system built in here with the restricted area that you have to build in, where you'd put stations for centralized pumping and all of that. Those are all challenges that are going to take whatever your cost estimates are and really kind of expand it beyond, I know we guess projects this way and they always go sideways. I'm trying to get all this out because I don't want to take people's time up. So you've got that. The electricity, by the way, when it goes out here, it goes out for more than a day. So, if you got 24 hours, you're in trouble. What did I miss here? The cost is going to definitely be a factor for any of us. And I like what you're doing, but I'd rather see a more targeted approach on trying to figure out how do we make sure people that have septics do pump them out on time, and the ones that are substandard, how do we figure out how to improve those? Because I think that's going to give you that, plus controlling runoff is going to give you the best bang for your buck. And I'll pass on to the next person.
Okay, thanks, John. Allison Centenary.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the time. I'm the current TLPOA president. And I know we've heard from a bunch of my board members recently, or our board members recently. I have just one thing to add, which I think is actually one of the bigger factors in the improvement in the lake, and that's the turnover we've had recently. And the fact that I think it's close to 90% of our members are full-time homeowners here, where before it was not that way. And I think that's also contributed a lot, especially since the 90s, if that's the data we're using, or 09, I'm sorry, to better quality. And I think that definitely needs to be raised and is a contributing factor to the quality of our lake. Was that taken into consideration?
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. Let me think about that. So the flows are based on the number of bedrooms within a house, and that does not, that assumes the house is occupied full time. Now, relative to the data, I just want to clarify something here, and there's been a couple of questions here, so it sounds like I didn't clarify it well before. When we did the model pulls data from current data. It's an EPA database. It's called the model is called Basins, and it pulls the most current data provided to the EPA for the area that we're looking at. And this model is set up for most of the United States. It's not everywhere yet, but it's a very comprehensive model. It's considered to be a very good mid-level model, and we're confident that the results are fairly accurate. But just to clarify, it does not use the data from 2009. It uses more recent data.
So our initial run, just to build on what Mike was saying, used the 2009 data because we did not pull any physical lake water samples and have them tested. So at the time, that was the best data, real live data that we could generate. So we used that as a basis to build our report on. And then as we got more familiar with the basin software, improved our understanding of the septic systems, evaluated all of the limitations around Lake Truesdale that John has mentioned, the slopes, the shallow water tables, the depth of bedrock, the small parcel size, we realized that there's probably more issues with the septic systems than have been identified. So when we peel, it's like peeling an onion. We just went back layer by layer by layer, and then we used the 2009 data more as a back check, knowing that since then, there have been multiple water quality improvements that the town has done. They've limited the phosphorus, you've limited the amount of sediments that are washing into the lake. You've made all of these small improvements. So we know that that number is going down. So that's why we ran our scenarios 4 different ways, and all 4 of these ways are outlined in great detail in the report. But we did a worst case scenario, which Mike has gone over. We've done probably the more applicable scenario, which is going to be the 15%. And we did just a 0 failures whatsoever, just to see what the baseline of everything that's not a septic system is going to contribute to the lake. Hopefully that clarifies the way that we presented the data. And I guess in perspective of the 2009 data.
Okay, and I have one more, Carol Cernak. I'll ask you to unmute.
Hi, it's Carol Cernak, South Salem. I will not address Peter Parsons personally, but I will address the entire board.
Is this about?
I would hope that the town board is following the DEC and the DEP guidelines for the wetlands maintenance and the discharge. I would hope that the town board is following and studying the sodium and the chloride discharge into the wetlands as guided by the DEC. Peter Parsons, you need to be quiet, and I'm going to stop.
About Lake Truesdale. If it is not
this is about Truesdale.
What is it then?
What is the highway garage contaminants? The highway garage that sits on Lake Truesdale. How is that being managed?
Oh,
how are the contaminants into that lake being managed? You want to go there? Other elements and minerals that are being discharged into the lake community.
Carol, this is
sodium
not about
chloride.
reducing the phosphorus in the lake.
And
that's
break it down.
the only thing being addressed by this.
If you're gonna implement
because that's the only thing which
if you're going to implement
wants to spend its money
a
on.
new wetlands sewer system, a new community sewer systems, it's going to add $300 a month to these people's mortgages. You want to pay that?
Fine.
I don't think
very
so.
much. That's it.
Yeah.
I'd like to move on now to Lake Walkabuck.
Thank you, everybody. The last page of our presentation, which is posted on the town website, has our contact information, and we're happy to help out if there's any questions. So thanks again. Have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, I'd now like to move on to Lake Walkabuck. Don Fletcher, David Haney, Rachel Schnabel of Barton Logudis. I'll never get that right.
Could they raise, oh, there they are. Okay, so it's Rachel. I'm asking you to mute, and David Haney. And then Don Fletcher. And they've made you co-hosts, correct, Sean? So that you can share your screen. Let us know if you can do that. Oh, good.
All right, does that look good? You can see one image. Okay, good, good.
That's good.
Thank you, everyone who's still on. Bear with me. I know the night is getting long. So we are presenting on the study we did for Lake Walkabuck. We're going to go over the evaluation we did of the existing septic systems, the water quality impacts to the study area, the wastewater management alternatives that we evaluated, their associated cost analyses, and the next steps. So as you can see here, outlined in red is the limits of the study area. It's made up of the Lake Walkabuck watershed, excluding Lake Rippewam and Lake Oskalita. Now you can't see them too well in this image, but Lake Ripawam and Lake Oskaleta are off to the right, and they drain directly into Lake Wacabuck via the stream here to the east. There are about 285 homes in the study area, and we've estimated a population of about 770 people. We looked at many different factors. Pretty much all of them have already been touched on from the previous presentations. But these are all factors that are constraints and environmental limitations to septic systems that can keep them from properly treating the wastewater. So we looked at the infiltration rates of the soils, the depth to the seasonal high groundwater table, depth to bedrock, steepness of slopes, proximity of the parcels to Lake Wacabuck and its tributaries. We also looked at parcel size, and we chose to focus on the parcels that are less than half an acre as those being limited in being able to properly support a septic system because of their limitations with being able to meet setback requirements to other property lines, to wells, but also the more tiny parcels that you have together with septic systems, the more concentrated the wastewater is in the area. So the more of the burden that there is on the soils in that area to do the treatment. We also took a look at the age and maintenance of the septic systems in the study area. The septic system should be pumped out and inspected at least once every 5 years. And as you can see from the image in the upper right corner, there's a few in red. Those are sites that we've identified that have not, there are no records of pump outs. That's not to say they haven't necessarily been pumped out, but the health department does not have any record of it. And so if you don't pump out your septic system, there is a very high chance of it failing. We also looked at how many septic failures are reported with the health department, and we found that an average of 2 septic failures per year have been reported. But obviously there may be more out there that have not been reported. And as was previously mentioned, subsurface failures are failures that often go unnoticed. And so that's where a lot of those environmental constraints that we looked at come into play with our evaluation. We also looked at the lifespan of the septic system. So EPA states that a typical lifespan is 15 to 40 years. If you look at the image in the bottom left-hand corner, all the parcels in red, we believe, have septic systems that are 50 years or older. And in yellow, those are septic systems that are 30 to 49 years old. There's a lot of very old septic systems in this study area. And when you put all of the information together, all the data that we collected and evaluated, we prioritized which sites we believe may have poorly functioning septic systems. Everything in red are sites that have those environmental constraints. So even if they had a new septic system, there are concerns that they still may not be able to properly treat the wastewater. Parcels that are in that darker orange color, the medium high priority, those are septic systems that are 50 years or older. So just due to being at the end of their life, we think they should be replaced or another alternative be implemented. And then the sort of yellowy orange, which there's only a couple of, they're on the older end, they're 30 to 49 years old, but it also is not a good maintenance record on file with the health department. So they are also a concern. The parcels that are in green are just vacant parcels or parcels outside of that study area line. And then the beige ones we are not concerned with. So now I'm going to hand it over to Dave Haney to talk about water quality impacts in the study area.
Thanks, Rachel. Good evening, everybody. So a lot of common themes. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these. They've been discussed in the prior presentations, but we all know the detrimental effects of high nutrient loads to all of the town's lakes, and Lake Wacabuck is not an exception. So we can experience depletion of dissolved oxygen, which can cause problems with the fisheries, increases in harmful algae blooms, of course, impairments of the drinking water supply chain. Nutrient loading can also make the lakes more vulnerable to invasive species, and of course, limit the recreational opportunities that the lakes afford. So as part of our study, we did collect a lot of data in the field. We were out in July. This figure just represents all of the different sampling locations, and we collected numerous parameters, nitrogen, phosphorus, of course, fecal coliform, a lot of parameters that were sent out to the lab and tested. And this just shows the spatial distribution of the samples that we collected on the lake. So what the data illustrated to us, it really backed up the CSLAP data. The lake has really benefited from a good background data set collected through the CSLAP program. And our data really supported the prior results. Phosphorus, of course, is the primary pollutant of concern. And on Lake Wacabuck, we have seen increased phosphorus levels really throughout the mid 80s to the current date. So our samples that we collected supported the prior data. We've got phosphorus concentrations in the lake that are 2 to 3 times greater than the state recommended limits. And one of the real interesting things that we found is that the highest phosphorus loads were actually on the inlet to Lake Wacabuck. So as Rachel mentioned, Lake Rippewam and Oskalita flow into Lake Wacabuck, and the highest phosphorus loads that we observed through our sampling program were on the eastern shore through the inlet into Lake Wacabuck. So currently the lake is in a mesotrophic state, which is fair water quality. Unfortunately, it is trending towards a eutrophic state. There are variables from year to year, but there have been frequent instances of harmful algae blooms, other algae present in the lake. And really the point of this study is to try to slow down the processes, primarily focused on the septic inputs, to decrease the rate that the lake is moving towards a eutrophic state, which is a poorer water quality than is currently experienced. So this is going to look similar to the Truesdale presentation. We also did nutrient load modeling, and we looked at a couple different scenarios. And what this pie chart shows is the phosphorus loading to the lake when we look at 2 failing septic systems per year. And Rachel mentioned that the county health department data reports on average that in Lake Wacabuck that there's 2 failing septic systems per year. So under that scenario, the septic phosphorus contribution is about 10% of the total phosphorus load to the lake. The remaining flows contributions from phosphorus are primarily associated with stormwater runoff.
Okay. So this is
this is really the worst case scenario, and this pie chart almost mimics the one that we saw in the last presentation. So the criteria that we used under the worst case scenario was we classified any septic system that meets any of the criteria on the right, those 7 bullet points, as a potential failure. And these may not be reported to the health department because they could be subsurface flows. And this is, just based conceptually on what could be the worst case scenario. So if a septic system was 50 years or older, if it was 30 to 49 years old without regular pump out data, if it's located within 100 feet of a water body, on slopes greater than 15%, if it's classified as a cesspool or seepage pit, and if the land has bedrock shallower than 4 feet, or if it's on a property less than a half acre. we lumped all of those together and we came up with 213 potential failing septic systems under this scenario. And with that potential, the septic loads for phosphorus are about 93% of the total phosphorus contribution.
So you're calling this the worst case scenario, but most of these conditions, or many of these conditions were met with your sort of survey.
That's correct.
So
out of all the properties surveyed, 213 of the properties met at least one of these criteria.
So in that sense, it's not the worst case scenario, it's kind of the base case in a sense. I mean, the other scenario you just showed us is not us.
Yes, the other scenario is just based on the reported failures to the county health department.
Yeah. Okay.
The idea is just to give a range. When we presented these results to DEP, they thought this was a little extreme. So we wanted to show the other end of the spectrum.
It's like such a huge difference. If you were at the 9% level, you would say, well, doesn't make sense to make all this investment for 9%. But if you're at this end, it does. So this is a critical part of the decision process here.
Definitely.
Yes, we agree. Yep, this really shows, what the benefit of the alternatives that Rachel is going to discuss can provide. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel.
But is there, this being such an important factor as to whether to spend all this money, is there another step we ought to take, as was mentioned with the Truesdale situation of doing, I don't know, more testing or whatever?
Yes, that would be part of the next phase, would be evaluating the septic systems to confirm how many are actually failing.
Okay, I figured I was jumping the gun. Go ahead, sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so because wastewater management solutions can be very expensive, one thing that we sort of did right off the bat was we broke the study area into 4 regions to see if there is a region that has a higher cost benefit ratio to sort of focus on. And so we broke it into the eastern region, the northwest region, the mid region, and the southern region. And you'll notice that it just so happens that none of these actually touch, but that's more of a coincidence than anything, because the golf course is down here and they have their own wastewater treatment plant. There's a preserve here. Right here are parcels that are not developable because of the steep slopes. And then you have Wacabuck River dividing the mid from the eastern regions. So when we took a look at them and just looked at what would be the cost to implement sewer within those regions, so not even connecting the sewer to a treatment plant. So this would be the cost of the sewer. And then we looked at the % phosphorus reduction in the lake based off of our model results. And as you can see, it's more cost effective to just focus on the eastern region because of how many small parcels are close together. And how many sites within that area we feel may be poorly functioning. So that'll come into play later when I discuss the alternatives. So as part of our baseline, the first alternative we looked at is just upgrades and or replacements of the septic systems that we feel are failing or poorly functioning. Now, as I mentioned before, the sites that have environmental constraints, you can replace the septic system, but that does not guarantee that the septic system will completely treat the wastewater. So for the sites with environmental constraints, we also recommend implementing a phosphorus treatment system. So it's a similar concept to the enhanced treatment units. It does not have nitrogen treatment because the focus of the study is phosphorus. But when you do get into using these types of systems, you are still missing the other components of treatment that happen in the soils. So, this doesn't disinfect the wastewater or anything to that effect. So while we did evaluate this as a potential option, we don't feel it necessarily has the best environmental benefit. The second alternative we looked at was implementing a community or cluster septic system. So that'd be a septic system for multiple homes. But as you can imagine, with a site that has, steep slopes, shallow bedrock, shallow groundwater, wetlands, you name it, it was very difficult to find land within the study area or immediately adjacent to the study area that could support a community septic system. If we were to do one community septic system for the entire study area, we would need 8 acres, just to give you an idea. What we did look at was South Shore Wacabuck Association has a corner of their property down here in the bottom right corner that is an undeveloped wooded area that they have considered previously for putting in a community septic system for the people who live there. And so we did take a closer look at that, and we did do some percolation testing and confirmed that it does look like the land can support a community septic system. There would need to be test pits done to confirm that, because we don't know for sure where the groundwater table is. But that was one option that we looked at. And then, looking at the bigger picture with the rest of the study area, it could be combined with that first alternative we looked at, where septic systems are replaced and phosphorus treatment units are implemented. Another alternative we looked at was connecting to an existing wastewater treatment plant. The nearest treatment plant is in Ridgefield, Connecticut, but they just recently did an upgrade to their plant, and they're already at capacity, and they actually don't have any additional physical space to do another expansion. So unfortunately, that's not an option. So we took a wider look within a 10-mile radius of the study area, and we found that the Heritage Hills wastewater treatment plant has capacity. However, there's always a caveat. It's pretty expensive to purchase the capacity to be able to connect to the treatment plant. And the treatment plant is about, I believe, 9 miles away. So to implement a sewer line that goes that far is fairly expensive. And all of this is without even beginning to consider the user fee for connecting to the treatment plant. The fourth alternative we looked at was building a new wastewater treatment plant. So looking at various sites within and adjacent to the study area, we came to the conclusion that the two best candidates are that space at South Shore Drive that we talked about for the community septic system, and then Lewisboro Elementary, which is a little ways outside of the study area. One of the benefits of pursuing an alternative like this is that our study area could team with the Truesdale study area and have one wastewater treatment plant, which the site is large enough to support. So for the South Shore Drive site, we chose to focus on just treating the eastern region to try to come up with a more cost-effective solution. So here are the model results for how much phosphorus can be reduced in the lake. And this is, again, looking at if 213 of the properties have failing or poorly functioning septic systems, then the most that could be removed from the lake would be 92% if there was a solution implemented for every single one of them. So this first one, the 17%, is to replace all the septic systems, and that's it. The second bar would also be to add phosphorus treatment to the septic system replacements. 7% would be removed if just a community septic system was implemented for the South Shore Wacabuck Association. 92% if you, again, replace the rest of the septic systems and add in phosphorus treatment. These next 4 bars are all what would be replaced from the various 4 regions if the wastewater was sent to a treatment plant, be it an existing one or a new one. So this first one's the eastern region would be 62% removed. The mid region would be 16% removed. The north region would be 10%, and the south would be 4%.
The first, the second column, 92%, that's all septics in the entire study region then? Or
It was anyone that was in red or orange in that figure I showed earlier. So most of them. Yeah, if
Okay,
we thought they were a
not
low
just these.
concern, we didn't think that they needed it.
Okay.
Okay, so costs. So this is just a capital cost to implement each of the alternatives that we just touched on. And as we've been sort of mentioning, alternatives, 1 and 2, they're both based off of doing some type of septic system, and that wouldn't necessarily treat all of the, contaminants from untreated wastewater to the lake. Although, with added phosphorus treatment, it could take care of the phosphorus problem. But because of that, we were more so leaning towards doing something more as a central form of treatment, a wastewater treatment plant solution. Now, as I alluded to, sending the wastewater to Heritage Hills would be very expensive. And then for South Shore, we specifically focused on the East region to try to make a more affordable solution. However, the South Shore site can support wastewater from the entire study area. And then here we have the Lewisboro Elementary option. And part of what makes this a little more expensive than if we were to do the entire study area at South Shore, which I don't have that number listed here, but Lewisboro Elementary, the property would have to be purchased and the building would need to be demoed. And given the age of the building, we believe that there would be a number of things that would make demolition more costly. But to elaborate, the building would need to be demoed because there are certain setback requirements to the property lines and the residential homes. And in order to meet those requirements, the treatment plant has to be at the center of the property, which is where the building is. So if you look at a life cycle cost analysis, this is the annual cost. If you were to break down that capital cost over 30 years with a low interest loan, and this also includes the cost of operation and maintenance, as well as short-lived assets. So that's saving up for those things that are going to break periodically throughout those 30 years. So it's basically the same ranking and costs in terms of what's the most expensive and the least expensive. And then again, just to sort of bring this back to the forefront, the percent of phosphorus that can be removed is, it's part of the reason we're even looking at this. So this is set up a little differently with the percentages. This is how much you can remove based off of all the contributions from septic systems. Before, we were looking at the percent of phosphorus that could be removed from all of the phosphorus contributions to lake. So I won't get too much into this, but again, this alternative 4A, which would be the wastewater treatment plant at South Shore, it is more expensive than these initial ones, but it is significantly less expensive than a treatment plant at Lewisboro Elementary for the entire study area or going to Heritage Hills. And yet you're still removing 2/3 of the phosphorus contributions from septic systems. So that is our recommended alternative. I'll try to wrap up quickly here, but the next steps, the engineering report is going to be finalized and submitted by December 1st. Then there would be a seeker and environmental review, a formation of the sewer district. Then there would need to be a bond resolution before the applications go in for funding. An agreement would need to be worked out with South Shore Wacabuck Association. So there'd be some kind of leasing agreement. Perhaps lower rates would be given to the residents as payment. And then the next phase would be preliminary design, which would be end of next year or 2023.
Could you clarify, go back to your recommendation? You're saying that, I mean, it looks to me like 1B is less than half the price of 4A. And so I wonder if you could talk us through that again.
Right. So there's two reasons why we're not really focusing on 1A or 1B. So the first, again, is the environmental concern. So while we're making sure that the phosphorus is removed because we're using these phosphorus treatment units, there's other contaminants in wastewater that aren't necessarily being treated before they reach Lake Wacabuck. So nitrogen's one of them, and you could do an enhanced treatment unit, but then there's also things like bacteria. Before you know it, if you try to treat for everything, each home is going to have its own treatment plant. And then you have to worry about all of those being maintained. The sort of phosphorus unit that we're looking at now, it's very low maintenance. It's a tank that's in between your septic tank and your leaching field. It's a passive system. You replace the media once every 7 years. So it's a very simple system.
That's the 1B system.
Yeah, that's 1B, which
Okay.
is similar to 2B. 2B just includes the community septic system at South Shore.
But if 1B is putting in enhanced systems but retaining the original fields, how big an issue, in reality, are these additional contaminants, bacteria and things like that?
There would need to be more of an analysis done, but if that is the route you'd want to go in, we could certainly go in that route. One of the things about setting up a program like that is that it's not as common to get funding for something like that versus putting in a treatment plant. And Don, I don't know if you want to chime in here.
I mean, there's different programs. Obviously, if it's a municipally owned system, that opens it up to the infrastructure bill, several, many state and federal programs, USDA, EFC, CWSRF, DEC with WQIP. I mean, there's a lot of acronyms, a lot of programs. There is a Westchester County septic program. We could look into other programs, but most of the systems would be owned privately. So that limits the amount of funding from the government that's allowed to be secured.
I mean, this is a kind of a format that we were talking about with some of the other lakes, though. So it's not that we're sort of going to be able to get away from that. And my guess is that this is going to come up more and more in the state in terms of these remediations, and more people are looking to the dollar effectiveness, where these dollars are going. So certainly it sounds like it shouldn't be off the table at this point anyway. And I don't
I don't know that anything's off the table.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I didn't say they were bad options. I just said we at this time are recommending 4A. Okay, so if we did a wastewater treatment plant at South Shore Drive, what we chose to do in terms of looking at cost and to try to make this affordable was we looked at, okay, what's the cost of the operations and maintenance and the short-lived assets, because that's something that you can't really get funding for. And so we broke that down and we looked at the average assessed value in the Eastern region and based the cost off of that, which is how the sewer districts are already set up in other parts of Lewisboro. And the average annual user fee would be $1,600. So depending on the value of somebody's property, it could be more, it could be less. So, but then funding would need to be found for that 16.6 million for the capital cost of the project. So the engineering report we put together specifically to be used to apply for grant funding. And then just in terms of, well, what about the rest of the study area? So when we sized the treatment plant, we sized it at 150% capacity so that other parts of the study area could be added at later phases. However, if the rest of the study area were to just have septic systems replaced, repaired, and those phosphorus treatment units put in, then that would be a cost of about 2.7 million. And then these are the individual costs of the sewers for each of the regions. And, if you're looking at it from a benefit perspective, the mid-region was the next most beneficial, which is opportunistic because it is adjacent to where the treatment plant would be. And then from there, you could move up to the north or down to the south. However, the south didn't have as many issues. And the north, while those sites have environmental constraints, the properties are very large, which does make it more so possible to find that little pocket on the site that is going to work for a septic system. The data that we use to do this analysis is sort of big picture data. So on a site-by-site basis, something may be able to be implemented. So these were a bunch of the funding programs that Don was talking about that are available now. And again, with the infrastructure bill, there's going to be more money available too. So this is a great time to get funding. Now, as we sort of alluded to earlier, Lake Rippewam and Lake Oskalita kind of, they weren't included in the study, and we do feel that they play a role in the phosphorus contributions to the lake. So we do recommend that a study be done of those two lakes. And because of their proximity to the proposed treatment plant location at South Shore Drive, to connect those homes would be very simple, and these parcels are very small. So if it were found that these homes should be added, it could be a very cost-effective, way to sort of reduce the user costs because more homes would be connected to the treatment plant with a very short sewer line compared to some of the other parts of the study area. And with that, I'll open up to questions. I do just want to point out we have a project website, lakewalkabuckstudy.com. I have heard that if you type in just lakewalkabuckstudy.com, some people it doesn't work. And so you really need to put in that HTTPS. So look out for that. My email address is on there if you have any questions outside of this presentation and you'd like to reach out to me later.
Okay, so I have two hands here. Charles Mason, I'll ask you to unmute.
Can you hear me now? I've unmuted.
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm the attorney for the South Shore Walkabout Association. I think you may know that. And I've been kind of touting this whole concept probably for the last, since 1945 or so. So this has been a pleasure to listen to because I think some of the things that we were thinking about are being vindicated. And at some point, I would love to sit down with a couple of people and really talk dollars and cents and exactly how we would implement this because, we're contributing a big piece of land there, but we would, we're just getting it done and we'd like to sort of work out a mutually acceptable way to do it.
All right, well, thank you. Paul Fennelly, I think, was next. I'll ask him to unmute.
Hello, everybody. I'm Paul Fennelly, and I live on Lake Oskalita, but as been pointed out, could potentially be impacting what happens in Lake Walkabuck. Also a member of the Three Lakes Council, and it hasn't been mentioned in these discussions, but over decades, I think Three Lakes Council has done extensive investigations on water quality in Lake Rippewam, Lake Oskalita, Lake Walkabuck. And I read the most recent report, which is 2 or 3 years old, and came to a meeting at the Walkabuck Country Club that talked about it. And I came away from that meeting thinking that there is a major source of phosphorus in all three of these lakes, which I haven't seen addressed tonight. And that is the phosphorus that is essentially embedded in the sediment at the bottom of these lakes. And that phosphorus is released every year as each of the lakes turn over and cycle between aerobic and anaerobic conditions at the bottom of the lake. And the impression I had from those research studies that were done by lake biologists, not what I'd call civil sanitary engineers. They were just focused on the lake themselves as a natural water body ecosystem. But my impression was there is a substantial amount of phosphorus that would continue to get into our lakes because of this annual turnover of the lakes, which people don't know. It's as the temperature profile changes from winter to spring to fall back to winter. And I just like to know if any of these engineering companies have looked at that as they've considered their phosphorus loadings, which to me, what's coming from the sediment, it's very different than what's coming from the day-to-day life of the houses that surround the lake.
Yes, I can address that. This is Dave Haney with Barton and LaJudas. So we did look at the internal loading for the phosphorus into the lake. It's detailed within the report, and we found that based on the external loading that's coming into the lake, that the internal source could be upwards of 50% of the external source. So there certainly is an internal loading source of phosphorus in the lake.
I think you ought to put that into your pie charts. I mean, hay fields and farms and this and that. My impression was it was very substantial. And from what you're saying, 50% is very substantial. And
where does that phosphorus come from? Is that the aggregation of the years of external loading, or
it's basically coming from the watershed runoff, and it's basically coming from things like the leaves falling off the trees and
it's a continuous source, and it's as you get the weed growth in the lakes that are feeding off the phosphorus contributions, is that macrophyte vegetation dies and settles down into the lake. It itself is a source of the phosphorus. So it's kind of just.
I don't want to diminish the focus on septic systems at all. I think the septic system situation is exacerbating or making the weed situation worse.
Yeah.
But the weed situation, as those weeds die and they settle down into the sediment, they're making the annual lake temperature turnover worse. So there's more to the picture than just septic systems. And I just say we need to expand the picture more and think about what's coming up from the bottoms of the lake. It may be less in Walkabuck, because Walkabuck is 200 to 300% deeper than the other two lakes.
Hi, Paul. This is Jan Anderson. Let me just hop in for a second. So yes, we do have internal loading, but one of the things that they talk about before you can fix internal loading, and it is worse on Walkabuck because there is more historical buildup of phosphorus there, is they say you ought to do what you can to keep more stuff from coming in, because it will continue to add to the internal load, which I think is what Dave was just saying.
Right.
But the other piece I wanted to say is that we have been looking and talking to the DEC, and the major things that can be used for nutrient inactivation on the bottom of the lake. An alum compound, aluminum sulfide, or aluminum, there's a number of different things of aluminum compounds that are used. And there is something called Phoslock, which is a clay and lanthanum combination. The DEC has for a long time not permitted alum, but we thought that they would permit Phoslock. I recently spoke with people at the DEC and some firms in this area. And the view is right now that New York City will, or not New York City, New York State will not permit either alum or Phoslock to be used. So while that remains a concern, it is not one, it's not, we don't have a lever to pull. So that makes, I think, the lever of septics even more important. So sorry to jump in, but I just wanted to say it is a component, but like rainfall, it's not necessarily something that we can control, whereas we have an opportunity to look at septics.
No, Jan, I'm glad you jumped in. I think you are on top of all of these issues for our three lakes, which includes Walkabuck. And I understand that New York DEC and its reservations. I'm all for improving the performance of septic fields, absolutely. And some of the things that have been suggested here, I think are important. But I wanted to raise this issue about the phosphorus from the sediment because it has to be part of the picture, particularly in terms of what the expectations will be about any type of septic program.
Great, thank you. So noted, and I think that's a good point. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I'll ask Tim Kennedy.
That's good.
Tim Kennedy?
Yep, I'm here. I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, I don't have a question. I just wanted to clarify that I'm president of South Shore Walkabuck Association. So that's our parcel of land that has been spoken about through the whole presentation. That the only thing that we've agreed on as an association was to explore the possibility of a community septic for our organization. That was the only thing we've agreed upon so far. Everything else is hypothetical. So I just want to be clear because, and I've mentioned this throughout this whole process. So we voted on that before the funding came about for this particular study. And then the study was for the whole of Lake Walkabuck. So I just want to be clear about that, like as in all the parcels that you've talked about and all the ones you didn't talk about but were studied, they're hypothetical. There's no agreement to do anything yet.
Yeah, no agreement yet.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Randy?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, good. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Yeah, I live on Perch Bay Road. I'm the president of the Walkabuck Landowners Association Council, and we've been having this conversation for a while. I have a lot of personal experience with septics. I grew up on Lake George, the north end of Lake George, in a cabin on the lake, and I remember digging up those septic systems, the old clay tiles, and replacing them with pipes and the grass grew and everything like that. And eventually we did what a lot of people did in Walkabuck that have large parcels of land. We had a pump it up the hill about 200, 250 feet from the lake and let it drain down. And again, I'm glad that this is finally, we've kind of ripped the Band-Aid off and looking at what's going on in Lake Walkabuck as well as the other lakes, because, so many of the homes on the lake, there's just not enough land to filter the sewage. It's a fact. I mean, the parcels are small. The septic fields, I don't even know how big they can be. They must be minute, but they definitely cannot handle the filtration expectations for water to be clean. I have lake access. I live on Perch Bay. When I built my house 25 years ago, they had me put in this ridiculous septic system. So I know what the requirements are, along with an 8-foot drain in front of my septic because it was groundwater and my property is totally dry. So I know what the regulations are, I know what the rules are, and I know they're very, very stringent, but I just see no way that those homes on Lake Walkabuck have enough land to even consider filtering. Hopefully with these enhanced treatment units, if that's the direction that we decide to go in, hopefully that'll minimize it and take out most of the, the toxic particles from sewage in the systems. But, those homes are small, the properties are small, and there's absolutely no way that water can be filtered. So I just wanted to add that. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Randy. And that's about it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for presenting and listening. I think we've just about had all the questions on the individual lakes without going to a general Q&A. Is there anybody with another specific lake question?
I have iPhone 2, maybe George.
Yeah, I think that's George Peterkin.
Okay, I'm asking him to mute.
That would make sense. To unmute or mute.
To unmute, but he's there. George?
Hi, it's George. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, my name's George Peterkin. I'm a resident of South Shore Drive, and I have about 3 questions. Number 1, can you give me a number of the houses outside of the South Shore Wacabuck Association that is in the east section that is going to be included in this potential waste treatment plant?
I know there's 164 homes in the east region that would go there, and I believe about 30 of them are from South Shore. So that'd be 134 roughly.
134 added plus the residents. Correct?
What do you mean plus the residents? So that would be 134. Plus the residents of South Shore, correct?
Correct. Okay. Also, question 2, what size measurement would the building look like? Length, width in that parcel?
So the layout could take a couple of different forms. It would probably be a small administration building, a small building for the headworks. So that would be where the screening takes place. And then there'd be another larger building. Can't remember off the top of my head how large it would be. I almost want to say I had that in the presentation and just didn't talk about it. Okay, so I have that it would take about half an acre, but that actually might include the offsets to the property boundaries and the residential homes. I can get back to you, George, with that information if you'd like.
Okay, your ballpark figure, I mean, you're the engineer. What size, length, and width is a half an acre?
Oh.
Well, the buildings won't take half an acre, Rachel. This is Don Fletcher here. I mean, that's got to take into account the side setbacks and everything. I mean, the building isn't going to be tremendously big.
No.
20, 30 by 40 feet, something like that. I mean.
Okay, 30 by 40 ballpark.
Rachel can get back to you with some more specifics, but it's
okay.
it's 2 trains for the SPR. So something in that kind of range.
Okay. My last question is it possible to get a tour of an existing up and running system that you are looking at to propose to South Shore?
So I've been talking to Tim about this. Every system is so different based on the size, the type of treatment, its location, how much money goes into aesthetics. I know Tim is looking into the other treatment plants that are in Lewisboro to see if they are similar. So we will try to find something for you, but given that this treatment plant would be so close to homes, it is actually required to be fully enclosed. So that's an important point. And it would have an odor treatment system. So the air coming from that building would be treated prior to being released to the air. I know there's probably concerns about noise. There are different engineering controls that can be used to mitigate noise. And because this is a wooded area, there can actually remain a buffer of trees around the building on top of, making the building sort of blend in with the neighborhood. So it's not that difficult to, put some nice siding on a building to make it look nicer.
I was going to recommend the Oak Ridge Wastewater District has, it's a pretty nice looking building. There's about 400 plus residences.
Or Michelle Estates, you don't even know it's there to drive by. So down the driveway in the woods, it's very modest.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, if, understanding that you're asking us to buy a car without looking at the car, we'd like to look at the car.
Well, you would be part of the design process. So that would be part of the negotiations, is making sure that you are comfortable with the design. So it's almost like customizing your car.
Okay. I mean, if you could get us to go to Oak Ridge or another place to take a tour, you guys decide, talk to Tim and, we'll post it and see who's interested, and we'll take a trip.
Sounds good.
I can help you with that, George, if you're interested.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Sorry to jump in. This is John Watson from Insight. We were involved with the design and construction of the Lewisboro Elementary School sewer treatment plant upgrade back about 15 years ago. That's the plant we're considering connecting to for the Lake Truesdale study. That was built to look like just one of the school buildings. So if you pull into the Lewisboro Elementary School, as you pull in the building furthest to the left, that's the sewer treatment plant, and it's right up. It's probably 50 feet away from the school building. It's brick. It looks just like one of the school buildings. So that's one that's right in your neighborhood that you could look at.
Okay.
That one is much smaller though than the size treatment plant we would be talking about.
Correct.
Okay. All right. If we could get a more fittable unit to look at, would be fine.
Okay, how about, are you done, George?
Yes, I'm done. That's my last question.
Okay, thank you. Now I'm asking Peter Jonathan, or Jonathan Peter, to unmute.
Hi, yeah, this is Jonathan Peter, and I've been sort of in and out for this meeting, so I apologize if this question's been asked already, at least for the Walkabuck side. But can you comment on the per home cost of this proposal?
Yes. So what we're proposing is the cost to cover the O&M and the short-lived asset reserve. And then finding funding for the remaining for the capital cost. So in that case, it would be an average. It's based on assessed property value of $1,600 per year. So if the assessed values are about 10% away from market value, the average is $38,000. So if you look up your property value, it can give you, through the assessor's website, it can give you an idea of where you'd be in relation to that 1,600.
And there's subsidy programs, Rachel, we would try to take a look at to work with the town on and the residents on the O&M cost if possible. And then obviously, as we said earlier, we'd be looking for grants to offset the mortgage on the capital cost of building the facilities.
Are you set, Jonathan?
I just have one more comment again. And so the property that's being discussed is part of South Shore Lake Wacabuck Association. And it sounds like everybody's excited to donate this property to the wastewater treatment plant.
I don't think anybody's been asked whether they want to or not want to, let alone how enthusiastic they are.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the proposition that's being then talked about the most. Yeah.
Yes.
We haven't, so throughout this process, Tim, who's the president of the South Shore Wacabuck Association, has been involved, and he has been trying to keep the association informed. And at the moment, nobody is, outright opposed to it. So we're trying to continue to build that relationship and keep things positive and see where this goes. So that's basically where we're at right now.
Okay, I just want to just add some clarity. Just so Tim mentioned before. So as an association, we're definitely enthusiastic to begin with. And initially, this project encompassed or as we were instructed, we're told it was for a septic field for South Shore Lake Wacabuck Association. And as this project matured, it's become much larger. And I certainly understand why people who don't live on South Shore Lake Wacabuck Association would be enthusiastic to put it here. But certainly, I feel like there are some other viewpoints that aren't necessarily being heard at this point, because at the time of this proposal is the first time that we're really sort of hearing about this as a wastewater treatment plant on this property.
I think one of the inputs that you'll want to get is financial, and it'll be interesting to see, if you were to build that plant, that centralized plant for just South Shore, what the per home cost would be, and the impact for the South Shore residents versus spreading it out on this larger population. So there might actually be a benefit, but we don't know that until we see all the numbers come in. But that's one thing to keep in mind.
Okay, so next we will go on to Frank's iPhone.
Hi there, this is Deb Courtney Lavero. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. I just want to thank Rachel and the team for all of your hard work. And Jay, I want to thank Jonathan for bringing out that point. As a member of South Shore, I'm kind of surprised hearing all of this information as if the water treatment plant on South Shore is the way that we're progressing ahead, because that hasn't been spoken to us at all. It's very new news for us as members of the association. And I just want to clarify that a number of concerns would come up for me personally, and I know a lot of other members of our association. So I think it's important that we don't jump ahead assuming that this is the path we're going to take. I know that there's a lot of research studies out there about air pollution for those that live right around a water treatment plant. So I think that those are important considerations to take into account as well as for us that live here.
Thank you for voicing your concerns, Deb. And we would for sure, focus on the air quality and make sure that it's good. So I hope nobody's worried about that.
But again, Rachel, like your response to my comment assumes that this is the path forward. And I just want to get clarity that as a member of the association, there would need to be a vote from all members here that we're comfortable moving forward with this, correct?
Definitely.
Okay, so if we could just be mindful of the language that we're using so that we're not kind of sending the message to the larger community that this is the path we're taking, I would really greatly appreciate that as well.
Understood.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And now M. Gordon.
Yes, I think I'm unmuted. I'm Mike Gordon. I'm also a member of the association, and you bet we're going to be just seeking to understand the environmental impact as George was mentioning. But I just had a clarification question. The $1,600 a year Does that include service on the debt or not? I thought it was presuming grant for the construction and no debt service.
So 1,600 would be to cover the operations and maintenance costs, and it would be to cover the short-lived asset reserve. And so that's the money set aside for when things break and need to be repaired. So it does not include any of the capital cost. So the hope would be to cover it with grant money as much as possible. At this time, we don't know how much funding we would be able to get.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next, BB Horowitz.
Hi, I guess I live or I own a cottage in the eastern section, and I was just had a question about the impact on the health of the lake of all the runoff from the asphalt roads. I'm aware there's drains underneath that I'm assuming drain into the lake, and I know you only dealt with how to mitigate the phosphorus load, but I'm just wondering if there's any advice on the impact of the storm drainage on the lake, or if it's not appropriate, I understand.
Yeah, we as far as the modeling goes, we were limited to looking at phosphorus and nitrogen, and really the focus of the study was limited towards the septic impacts, but certainly there are other variables with stormwater runoff from roadside ditches, stream banks that need stabilized, and many other areas that would come into play. But really the focus of the study had to be limited to the phosphorus loads from the septic systems.
I thought your pie chart did have those non-septic sources though.
It did, but we couldn't go into depth and detail on looking at recommendations for stormwater runoff. That they had to be focused on the septic variables.
New York City's made it very clear that they were not prepared to fund any work on runoff.
No, that's fine, but I think if we could just kind of return for a second to the percent of the total, load that's going on the lake. I think we were saying on our quotation marks worst case scenario, septics were 92% or something. Is that based on some actual concrete look at stormwater contributions, or just sort of benchmarks, national benchmarks or something?
It's based on, so the remaining, 7.56% would be under this scenario, stormwater runoff contributions. And that's based on data sets specific to the project, cover type, slopes, soil conditions. So it is based on very specific information for the study area.
But not actually like going to the outflow points and measuring.
No, there was no sampling done at the outflow points from the roadside drainage, just all within the lake itself.
But you feel that based on these other factors, that the sort of plus minus that you're dealing with is reasonable in terms of this pie we're looking at.
Yes, under this scenario for the 213 systems, yes.
Is there some overlap in these two things, in as much as is it possible that some of the load that's coming from the septics makes its way into the stormwater?
So for if you have a surface failure from your septic system, and that's the type that's usually reported to the health department, because that's the obvious one, that's where wastewater is coming up onto the ground. Stormwater runoff could certainly, carry that into the lake. But
we have lots of places where groundwater just kind of bubbles up from the upper reaches, where up there it may be, coming from who knows where. I don't know, but all right. I think that's helpful anyway.
So Peter, what are the next steps here? Now that we have these initial presentations, we have the studies.
Well, the next step is that on December, some date in December,
first,
the final studies are due.
Right, and I did see that scheduled, but I guess there's some other decisions that need to be made before we, for example, we have to decide on which mitigation.
Yeah, I personally think that that there needs to be a little bit closer look at those two scenarios on the Walkabout thing, because it's, you're talking about 100% difference in the capital cost. And if those additional, pollutant mitigations are not, that significant, like based on today, what are the problems we're having? If those are not problems today with our bad septic systems, one would think with the alternative systems that we'd be even better, and our phosphorus problem would be taken care of, and that may be adequate. And I don't know that that's the case, but we need a decision process to look at those.
All I'm saying, Dan, is that they are working under a very tight schedule dictated by New York City.
So that schedule that we just saw came from New York City?
Yes.
So
or came from NewPick, which is the agency running it on behalf of New York City.
Right.
Jim, I'm sorry, am I wrong?
Can we see that schedule again?
I think the only thing that really came from the NewPick is the December 1st date of the final. I think and one of the reasons that I am really grateful that this was presented is that after that, and after the data comes out, I think the community, as Dan was saying, and as the various members have already talked about, have to really kind of understand the reports. These are going to be long reports. Take a chance to go through them, and then we should establish some way to get sort of a pulse of the community, and to get a better sense of what the real costs are. We have the cost, but the cost per individual, what's a realistic grant that we might be able to get. We don't know what's going to come out under infrastructure. There's a lot to learn. So I don't think the decision is immediate. I think the first thing is to get the reports, and then start to get, some help of the very smart people around the community to help us understand what they all mean.
I mean, I heard I think what I heard was, we want to use this report as the basis for a grant application. So that kind of implies that you've made your decision on which direction you're going. And yet I think the report ought to give a good opportunity in there to look at those two options. And then, as Jan said, like, go through something of a community process to just make sure we're getting aligned, and then go for a decision.
Right. And that's why I asked about the scheduling, because the schedule I saw, that looked pretty aggressive considering all the steps that we still need to.
Yes, it is aggressive. But we didn't. to some extent, the people who have funded the report are the people calling the shots.
So they're asking us to pass a bond resolution without knowing.
No. This is Don Fletcher. The schedule that NUIPAC put out was that the final report would be in by December 1st. Then there was a schedule that was placed up there by Rachel, which has a lot of flexibility in it. Those are really, as much as anything, what the next steps could be. But one of the biggest things that we need to have is enough public participation and engagement to actually engage and understand and agree on what the project is moving forward. Some of that's going to be obviously based on a lot of the public's thoughts and what is fundable and to what levels it's fundable. That schedule, though, shown up with 5 or 6 bullet points, has flexibility in it. That was not dictated at all by DEP, DEC, right, New York City, or NUIPAC.
Here's a crazy idea. Can we submit a grant application with both scenarios? Because we don't know which one might be funded and or how much of each one would be funded. So, you know, if it turns out that 100% of the central treatment plant is funded, but, you know, only 20% of the individual retrofits, then, you know, seems like financially it may be you go for the central facility and on, and, you know, those inputs would be critical.
Sure. I would think at least as we're investigating it and talking to the public, we'd engage the funding agencies to understand what they think could be the funding limits and probability of success. And then whether we actually submit one for each, that we would have to see if that makes sense. At least we would gauge the interest in what the potential is for each. I would agree with you on that.
So is there maybe a need for a session with the funders going through, you know, preliminarily going through these findings?
Well, I would absolutely tell you that I think ultimately it is. I think one of the steps that the town's going to have to figure out is that the funding from DEP associated with doing this study, I believe, is done when the study for each of the 3 lakes goes in on the 1st of December. So then it's where does the pot of money come to figure that out? Because as was noted earlier in our study of Walkabout compared to the other 2, it was brought forth by the town and Peter, should we study the other 2 lakes? And the DOH and DEC both, you know, just to give you an idea, both acknowledged and agreed it should be reviewed. We said we'd get the study done to meet the same schedule. And the word we heard back from the DEP is we couldn't execute a contract change in that amount of time. So we're not going to be able to do that. So it just goes to my point of, I think the next step needs to be, where's the funding going to come from to continue on evaluating and figuring this all out?
We have some more hands up. Do we want to take additional questions?
Sure. Tim Kennedy, I'm asking you to unmute.
Okay, yeah. So a lot of, you know, the last information session, there's a lot of new information here than was at the last information session. There's a lot of new information here that was certainly, that has certainly come out since our last South Shore Walkabuck Association meeting. So, you know, most of what's here is the conclusions that the engineering company has come to. So, you know, for us, you know, we have to, you know, we have to digest this and go through and figure out where how we feel about this as an organization, because, you know, as Jonathan said earlier, you know, this thing has evolved from, you know, a couple of years ago with looking, you know, with a different engineering firm in Armonk looking at a community septic for us. And then as it's expanded and grown, and now, you know, this is the main, you know, the main conclusion that it's come to is that this is the one piece of land that's usable for and then suddenly instead of just us, now we're taking everybody. So, from where we stand, we have a long way to go, because we have to look at it, and we have to, our members have to decide whether it's something that they're interested in going forward with or not.
Okay, and the next person. Nick Fagoli.
Thank you much. Just one thing that I think a lot of folks didn't quite get at the beginning of this call is these are just recommendations. These aren't what we're doing, period, the end, have a nice day. This is what these engineering firms are bringing to our attention as lake residents, as the town, as things that they feel would be beneficial in terms of this one specific area, which is phosphorus. So I don't think that was quite like, it's not going to be done. It's not starting tomorrow. It's not, this is just a process that takes time. So it's not, so I know a lot of folks are a little worried that this is going to be rushed to implemented. The one thing I loved hearing about the Walkabuck presentation, which me being on the Truesdale one for all those months, and it's something that I brought up, and I believe Vince at the DEP brought up, is our lake was a little bit super focused on a sewer system rather than other potential mitigation probabilities that were probably more palatable to the membership of the associations and the Truesdale homeowners. So seeing how the Walkabuck one was structured and presented, I kind of wish ours was a little bit more, because in March we had a special meeting of my association, which is half of the lake, and giving them a little preliminary of where this was heading on our lake. The overriding feeling from the 60 some odd homeowners out of our 150 was, there's no way this is going to happen for us. Like to do a full on septic, and so I wish on our lake there were other options discussed and more presented and more kind of fleshed out than really kind of going for the full on so-called nuclear option. But I think a big part of this, and Peter and I discussed it on those calls, where, this is going to be, everyone has to be on board. Every homeowner, there will be a vote. People will decide. They'll actually get a real cost estimate. And then every lake will decide for itself whether it's in our interest to move forward. And again, a lot of it's going to be funding, because with our presentation at $100,000 per homeowner cost to build our system, and then somewhere around, I think it was $180 a month continuing cost. Obviously, we are probably one of the most economically diverse areas of our town in terms of, wealth of homeowner. That's just obviously not palatable in any way for 80% of the homeowners in our association. So just want everyone to kind of, because I think I bet a lot of the questions are about timeline, and it's not, I just wanted to be clear. And this is someone who's not on the board, not on the town board, and not an engineer. This is not like, this is going to start January. So don't get upset. That's just wanted that out there.
All right, thanks, Nick. And Karen Conti, I'm asking you to unmute.
Hi, I'm a resident of Lake Kitchewan, and that portion of this meeting took about 20 minutes, and we've been talking for 3 hours. And so I feel a little bit at a loss. I've learned so much about what's going to be happening at Walkabuck and Truesdale, or might be happening, but I don't feel that the discussion was that comprehensive about Lake Kitchewan, and there was no representation from our board to ask questions, or people who knew what's going on.
Paul Gallagher was the representative, and he couldn't get on, if you remember.
Right. So, some of the other, both of the other boards had people who really understood what was going on with this.
Paul Gallagher very much understands what's going on.
Yeah. Well, okay, Peter, but he hasn't shared that with any of us. So I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know any of this.
I don't know. I mean,
Well, I'm not accusing Paul Gallagher. I'm just saying that this is a lot of information to absorb. And will the town help the local associations figure out what the right courses are? We talked about enhanced septic systems for certain homes. It was unclear exactly which homes those were, and that they would only last about 10 years, and that there would be significant maintenance monthly or yearly, which, that's not happening on Lake Kitchewan. People are struggling to pump their systems on a regular basis. We don't know how many homes have septic systems that are failing, but I can tell you that when I go out after rain, my neighborhood smells really bad. So I would say just around my house, there has to be a couple of them. So I would really like to know what the town is going to do. Are you going to be writing the grants? How are we going to really learn more about what kind of programs are available? Guidance about what the study really means. Like, Jan was talking about reading the study closely. I mean, I could look at it, it's 90 pages, but I don't have the expertise to really understand what the study is really talking about. So how are we going to get support for this?
In essence, that's up to each lake association, whether it wants to go.
So we're not going to get support beyond.
Each of you are private lakes. The town is not about to put money into a private lake, which taxpayers have no access to.
Well, I think where we are now is that, as Karen's just saying, that this process of conveying information and getting people, updated hasn't gone as far as it needs to go for them to engage. So let's think about how now this particular session is recorded now. So I mean, that's certainly one thing that people can do for a start, is to, if they haven't got on the session now, they can get on it. And a lot of the sort of technical considerations that you heard discussed for the other lakes, I think by implication sort of are things that would have been thought about for Kitchewan as well. But my understanding, there's just, the centralized treatment plant was just kind of off the table. There's nowhere in the world to put it. So that's why, the only options you were left with was updating the septic systems to get
right. But Dan, so we have this 90-page report that we're going to get in a couple of weeks. It's up to us in the lake to find the expertise to help us understand it, figure out how much money it would cost per person. And then if we need a grant.
No, I think you're in the same boat as everybody, Karen. Well, I have the same question about the other studies. Like none of us are in a position to really render a final opinion, given the thinness of the numbers right now. And there seems to be a whole chicken and egg thing where, well, we can't really have numbers until we sort of decide what the scenario is, but we can't decide on the pathway until we know the numbers. Like, if you ask us in Wacabuck, should it be one or the other? Well, how do we know if we don't know? And then that's tied to, which one might obtain enough grant funding to defray. So I think we're all kind of in the same boat.
Yeah. And I'm just, of course, speaking for where I live, because I understand, the community. So let's say that a community decides, we want to try, they vote and say, let's try to do this, or let's try to do that. Who writes the grants?
Peter, is there funding for a follow-on to this?
No, there is no funding for a follow-on.
All right.
At the moment, we took the funding on a timetable that was given to us with very severe restrictions. For instance, you've quietly heard about my battle with New York City about including the Twin Lakes in with Lake Wacabuck, where I failed. Because they didn't want to do it. I personally felt that was totally illogical.
All right, so
Okay,
it sounds to me
so-
like we don't have an answer for how the
Okay, so,
grants are going to be.
you know, forgive me for
today.
just maybe, I don't, Dan and Peter. If the Three Lakes come up, you know, we vote and we say, this is the plan we want. And, you know, if we don't have professional people or people who are knowledgeable writing the grant, and we don't get the grant, then all of this is moot.
Yeah, I think it's too early to be discussing grants because there's a lot of steps that go into it. There are grants that are available only to municipalities, like someone mentioned the Water Infrastructure Improvement Act, the New York State EFC grant. Those are only available to municipalities. And so we need to figure out, okay, which grants are there? And in the case of some of the grants that we've worked on in the past, we've had our engineering company help us with that, with the actual grant application. And it boils down to having an engineering plan in place, which is the basis for that grant application. So, but I think it's too early for us to discuss now where the funding is going to come from, because there's needs to be some steps taken before we get to the point where we identify what grants we're going to go after.
And Tony, those municipal only grants, like if these things become lake districts, they then become sub-municipal entities.
Yeah, so if they form a district corporation, for example, with the WIA grant, you can then apply for the WIA grant, which is a reimbursable grant, which needs to be backed up by a loan, for example, which New York State provides as well.
So more work to do on this. And,
right.
Okay, it would be.
So that's why I'm saying it's too premature for us to talk about how this is going to be funded, because we don't know the makeup of, you know, is it going to be a district and incorporated district? Is it going to be, is the town somehow involved and it turns into a municipal application for the grant? That needs to be determined.
I mean, the grant money that we need to find next, if we can, is really, I'll call it the next step, project development type money. You know what I mean? Because that's really where we're at, is we've done a study looking at some options. They're wide and long. Different people have different interests as to what's important to them. And so now it's taking a lot of this data and data sets and cost estimates, which is a great first step. But it's then really, you know, digesting it, asking a lot of questions and figuring it out at each lake, obviously what needs to be done. So some project, what would ideally happen, I would think, is getting a little bit of project development grant money, so to speak, to try and do some of that.
How do we do that, Dan?
Which the final product would be then an engineering scope good enough for the final.
Yeah, I mean, I think you take the same report, and if the decisions made by the lake associations with the town is that any of the recommendations tweak, I mean, ultimately you need your report to match what your funding applications are, obviously. So the first step that was funded by NUIPEC was these studies. You know, there's different things. I mean, you know, there's DASNY SAM grants, you know, there's which are essentially member items from your state representatives. You know, is there money available through one of them to help advance this cause? You know, there's some other things we should look at, like maybe a USDA planning grant and things like that. So I think there's some things out there because you're right. As you want to really take the next step and look, you still want your planning professionals involved with trying to figure some of this out.
Okay.
Okay,
This
and
is
then
Jan, I just wanted to mention that I believe one of the things that has been set up is a meeting sometime in December with Peter and Tony, and I think representatives that were active during this whole this last year of work on these grants, to try to figure out exactly that question. Where do we go next? Who does what? You know, I mean, I think it's so the questions that people are asking, I think, are valid, but they're ones that as I think Tony was saying, are premature. Right now, what we have is we've gotten data and information. And I think the first thing is to try to understand all of that. And I think, you know, the next thing really is for the communities to sort of say, do we want to pursue this any further? You know, we've heard from South Shore saying, we're not sure we want everybody else there. I'm going to say, you know, we don't know that the eastern group of homes, which I would say continue to be the, you know, have diverse economic populations in them, would want to be part of this as well. So I think I don't want to get ahead of ourselves too much. This is to hear the results of the reports. We have to figure out where we go next. I don't think it's been charted out, and I think getting people in the community to really understand these reports, and this is the reason we're having this now, is because just reading a bunch of reports is difficult, and then to start to figure out how do we get knowledge of what the different communities really want. So these are good questions, but the answers are not there yet, in my view.
And quite honestly, a lot of the answers depend on each lake, on the residents of each lake. All right.
Okay, there's one more, Peter, Jonathan Peter.
Okay, because I'd like to bring this to an end.
Yes, and
because I don't think we're making
Okay.
any progress any longer.
correct. Jonathan Peter?
Yeah,
please.
you know, I just have I guess a separate question as a larger community. It seems that that Oskalita and Ripawam, you know, I know that you have tried to include them, but I also know that the largest concentration of phosphorus in Lake Wacabuck was at the inlet.
That was my case. All right.
Yeah. So I feel like in the future, this we'll be back in this same position again. And so I guess maybe I'm just echoing Jan's sentiment again. And it seems that we're hastily making a decision that doesn't fully address the problem and maybe doesn't account for all the users' really desires. So I guess I'm just echoing that again.
Okay.
I know, I think looks like Frank has a question too.
He's had his hand up. Frank's iPhone. I'm asking you to unmute, Frank.
Hi, how are you, Jan? Thank you, Jan, for all your hard work. And Rachel, it's Frank from South Shore. Thanks again. I guess one thing, just to clear up some anxiety for some of the South Shore Wacabuck Association members. The question is, will this report that the firm has generated go to the state with this option or this recommendation of a treatment plant here on South Shore Drive behind the mailboxes before or without the consent of a vote by the members here in the association?
It could.
How could that?
John or Frank, I'm sorry. We can,
Because we didn't pay for it.
and we can soften some language or add some language that clearly extensive public participation is needed. I mean, there's no doubt for any town, you know, in simple terms, if a town district was going to move forward, that alone takes a vote right there. And if it's voted down, it's obviously voted down. But I don't think, I mean, just realistically, time schedule, it was a very tight schedule to begin with on all three lakes from day one. This final report is in by December 1st. So I mean, realistically, there's not going to be a vote by any associations on anything, I don't think, before these go in. Can we soften the language of clearly there needs to be extensive public outreach and decision-making? Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, I think that's very important, especially for our members. There's definitely some anxiety tonight. And just to be clear, it's sort of confusing still that it was a recommendation that wasn't offered by us. Like, so I think it's important for, if that's the only way you can do it to soften the language, and I know we didn't pay for the study, and I guess you can talk about any plot of land. It's almost like you're talking about, like, you know, somebody's house in Twin Lakes. Like, I want to take these 2 homes and make a treatment plant there. Like, I guess no one's given that permission. I guess I hear what you're saying, but I hope that in the final report, unless there's a vote, that you can soften the language. If not, just say that it's dependent on a vote.
The only reason I'm saying I can imagine it going to the state is the state forced New York City to go ahead with these studies, to fund them. And New York City could send them to the state to show that they've actually done it.
Yeah, so these are all potential paths to improve water quality, and all of them are contingent on X, Y, and Z, you know, and many things.
And there are a whole lot, remember, not in Lewisboro, but quite a lot of these studies have been done up in Putnam.
All right. Thank you so much for your time and all your hard work.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to call this meeting to an end and thank everybody very much for their time.
You just need to announce our next town board meeting, I think, for Monday.
Thanks, Rich. Yep.
Rich, you're good at this. The next town board meeting will be Monday, November 22nd, 2021 at 7:30 at the Lewisboro Library.
Thank you.
Thanks.